Hello there and welcome to another episode of the Cliff Notes podcast, where we ask a leader and find their way. Today I've been joined by Justin Halfpenny, who's helping innovative manufacturers accelerate their product adoption. And he's CEO at Caddify, which is a digital companion platform. Hello there, Justin.
Hi, Tristan. Thanks for having me.
That's great. It's great. It's nice to catch up with you again. And I just wondered, just for the rest of the audience, give you a little bit of a background. How have you got into the industry and got you closer to forming the company of Caddify?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so my background is traditionally in manufacturing, but moving into IT, the operations, of course, and service and support, was doing that for 20 years. And then sort of in the mid to late 2000s, we were starting to develop the IT side of the business, particularly around mobile for our field service and our customer support systems, and just came up against lots of problems with releasing software for mobile. And so early 2010, 2011, started to think about, how could I solve that for the wider audience, and formed a company called Mobile Caddy at the time, which was a mobile development platform. So quite techy or for developers. During the next sort of 5-6 years, we created a number of apps, which we'll come to see are called companion apps, but we built those by hand using our platform, still all in the manufacturing side. And then, which we'll talk about, the change in the market meant that the developers were very costly. And so we started to think about how we could do that with what we call no code, but a very easy way of us creating these mobile apps. And hence we ended up with our current company, Caddify, which is, as you say, all around companion apps. And the last 2 years has seen us sort of go through the beta process of releasing a product and finally into a general release now.
So you've moved away from working sort of more in-house or with one set of requirements, and you're working with a multiple of different partners and clients now. Is that what's happened?
Yeah, that's right. It's more sort of about scale. So when you have an app developed from the development side, so lots of developers, cost, cycles, there's only so much you can scale. Whereas now Caddify, our current product, is what we call no code. So it allows us to let the client actually progress without the cost of the developers. And really, it's all about scale and bringing down cost and accessibility.
Mm-hmm. I mean, before I want to come back and understand what is a companion app, I mean, what's the space for this? I mean, what's the problem it's trying to solve?
Yeah, it's a good shout. So just leaning on my history a little bit, product support, whether that be for your own staff, for field service, whether that be factory staff, on the factory floor, whether that be customers out using the manufactured product, whether that's through onboarding, training, education, support, maintenance. All of those sort of tasks, currently we sort of issue, a PDF manual at best or a paper manual. And of course, that's not kept up to date and probably not there with the machine at the time. And so the problem we wanted to solve here was, how do you use technology to increase what we call successful product adoption? So that means, how do we get a piece of machinery or equipment into someone's hands, make them successful with that, and importantly for the manufacturer themselves, actually adopt that as part of their business or process going forward, and of course then drive revenue. And that's pretty much in the dark ages, as even as consumers will understand that you can buy a quite expensive product and you'll have a PDF that you'll download that was written sort of 10 years ago and try and trawl your way through that, whether that's for initially setting it up or whatever. And if you go to the other side of things, if you buy software today, customer success is a big part of that. So making sure that you get started and you're successful with the product going forward. And so we're just sort of mirroring what's happened in software, but for physical products.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I just wanted to make sure. This idea of a product, this could be a lathe, it could be something in a lab, it could be testing equipment. This is around sort of training and guides and helpful equipment that they're accessing from their mobile device, from a tablet or a mobile phone or something. Is that what we're saying?
That's exactly right. So the equipment that you just mentioned, all those sort of products, but you could also have things like agricultural machinery, construction machinery, for example, or medical devices, but all sitting in that where you've got normally a user isolated using something that could be quite complex. And to your point, absolutely, providing that information that makes them successful really is the sort of broad term. But to your point, it could be whether it's calibration, how do I calibrate this thing? Something's gone wrong, so I'm troubleshooting. Or what we're really good at in manufacturing is sort of obfuscating the simple way of selling something. So we give someone an error code 1050, and we're just sort of looking at a display thinking, what does that mean? So sometimes it's just even a reference guide of, where do I start with this problem, or where do I start in terms of fixing this issue?
Mm-hmm. No, that sounds really good. So you let the staff download this app to be companion with the products that they've got in front of them. And then it's either to help guide them with their initial training or their refresher training. Or what else were you saying? Stuff about sort of health and safety or checklists? Or is it that it can be flexible? You got some pictures, you can have video. I mean, what sort of training or what sort of help is it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good point. So the media and the medium, when we think about what we're actually trying to do as a manufacturing industry to get our products adopted, it's about value realization. So it's about someone realizing the value of our product. So there's this potential value that we deliver as the product goes out from a warehouse or shipped out. And then it's all of those things that you said, every point through the value realization or realizing the value. So that's really understanding the product itself, what its application is, the features, how I turn those features into capabilities, and eventually how those capabilities then come together to give me the benefits and value, and importantly, the outcomes. And so absolutely, the outcome could be a safe operation of this machine. So the companion app will contain not just the sort of functional do this, do that, but how to do this safely. At its core, we're backed by our own platform, which is really most people would understand what CMS, a content management system, is. So where you put content and manage it. And you can put any type of content in there. To your point, it could be a checklist for health and safety, but it could also be a checklist for actually how to set up and maybe start the machine. And you can then combine those. So we have 2 or 3 different types of information that you can add and then become branded interfaces on a branded mobile app. A good example of this is a high scale is Tesla. So if you buy a new Tesla, you'll get a companion app with your Tesla car, tell you how to use the car, how to charge it, and so on. And that's the sort of current level you have to be at the Tesla size. And so our aim is really to make this sort of technology accessible for, whether it be a new startup in manufacture or right up to not quite Tesla size, but, a larger organization who may be pushing out a new product line or an update, for example.
Mm-hmm. So the idea is that it would ship with the product. There's like a QR code or go and get the app to go with this, rather than necessarily a factory's making it for their own lines or their own tooling? Or have you got examples where that might happen in both directions? There might be cases for each of those.
Absolutely. The factory side for your own staff is already a growing category. We tend to be more focused on our customer, so the manufacturer's end user or customer. But absolutely the same value is trying to be created. The interesting thing around the difference between, say, your own staff versus your customer gaining this information is that sort of the branding and the look and the feel and the ease of use has to be notched up because we're competing as an app, if you like. So let's use an agricultural machinery that's being pushed out, that the farmer, the end user there would be using Facebook and Twitter, and that's the standard that they're used to. And so the branding and usability, what we call the user experience, is really important for the app as much as the information they're obtaining from that companion app. So our little strapline is every product will be shipped with a companion app, and that's exactly right. Something that helps me be successful with the product. Primarily the end user, but of course that information could also be very helpful for either your sales team if you've got distributors, or for your own staff if they're actually working with your product in a sort of a more traditional factory line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So that you could have a different type of app that was helpful for sales versus what's something that's making sure that people are getting efficient and safe operation of any piece of tooling. I mean, you're saying every product should be shipped with a companion app. I mean, have you got some examples? What have you been shipping, or what have your customers been shipping?
Yeah, really good example for us. So originally we built these apps by hand, and then that was when we were like, right, we should really make a product that makes this a lot quicker and easier. But the medical device industry is a really good example where they have what they call IFUs, instructions for use. In the more general manufacturing, we call them operational manuals or whatnot. And so there, the idea is that you've got a set of instructions that go with this medical device. And so with our launch customer, actually, Biocomposites, who's a UK manufacturer of a medical device, they actually use the companion app to support their product in surgery. So that's where maybe it's very difficult to actually access and do training because you're in quite a stressful environment. So that's a really good sort of use case. Of course, it can mirror across industries. And so that might be just a reference to what the setup time should be, or maybe what I should be mixing, this component with, for example. Or as I say, maybe there's an error. And of course, that is quite a critical environment in surgery. So, how do I resolve that error without actually having to go on some support line as well? And the other side of that is actually to the point about sales enablement, training your reps that actually, so your distributors, often your third party distributors, to understand your product, what its benefits and features will be, how easy it is to use. Of course, the companion app can also assist there and in its own right become an upsell. So if I sell a product with a companion app, I'm already sort of giving you the vibe that I'm going to not just sell you a product, I'm trying to help you achieve your outcome as a customer. And I think there are a number of manufacturers already really sort of switching from the sort of features and benefits sale to an outcome sale. And, we see that through servitization in the big side, but also more generally, this idea of customer success being actually a function that manufacturers should start and be, a leader in, obviously to drive their revenue and most importantly for manufacturers, that repeat sale.
Yeah. So with that outcome in mind, is there a way of sort of tracking or monitoring the outcome? Or are you thinking of that as much as the intent of building one of these and supplying one of these? Or there's actual ways of seeing what the people using it are achieving?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So analytics is a big part. So when you actually release an application on the iOS or Android, so that's your iPhone or your Google phone, to be a branded application. So if we think of Acme, we'd have a branded application so you'll be searchable and discoverable and also be available via QR code, as you mentioned. And then once the user base starts to interact with those apps, you see the usage from the store side. So how many downloads, if you like, how many users you've got. But then inside the application itself, let's say you built a troubleshooting flow for calibration. So I can search for that from either the product or just more generally from a search. I use that flow. We can actually then show you on the back end, that's your Caddify platform, the number of times that flow has been interacted with, etc. So you can start to get a flavor of, where the good use is. It's an interesting part, though, analytics, because you've also got to understand where your gaps are. And of course, analytics in itself won't show where those gaps are. So we run a number of workshops called value realization workshops, and they're really to surface where those hidden gaps are, where expertise is needed by your user or your customer to sort of surface that new content you might have. I'm sure you've had the same frustration. You'll look through a manual and it'll have every part that you want to understand apart from the bit you're looking for. So that exercise there, the value realization exercise, is really the sort of starting point as you come through to get better and better at helping your customers achieve their outcomes.
With that, though, does that mean that the app is flexible, that it could keep getting maintained and changed and adapt? Or, once we've made the version of app we want to start people using, is that then fixed or is it flexible still?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Tristan. The old way was you would develop a single application to solve the current purpose that you had, and then you'd have to go through another development cycle again. Many moons ago, as you'll probably know, that was the same for websites. And if we think of the companion as a sort of sister to your website, today it's very normal to add a blog post, for example, or a new page to your website in real time. And that's exactly what Caddify does for the companion app. So you've got real-time publishing, but you've also got real-time what we call emulators. So you can actually see what your new information or your new guide or your new troubleshooting flow, for example, looks like before you publish it to the masses, if you like. And that allows your team to sort of iterate without cost. And so a good point would be if we had some feedback as a manufacturer that, this particular, keeping on the calibration story, this particular bit of calibration was causing people problems. They didn't understand, the messaging we'd put out about how to do the calibration. Your team can version that particular flow, for example, which is just a step-by-step flow with branching, and could create a new version and then publish that live without any developers. And that would be available to your users in near real time, so that as you push that out, it gets pushed through the store and your users get available. But that means we can start very small, look at the value you're already delivering, get that digitized, and then start to bring these other elements in. So the richer media, maybe a video, is more helpful to show the calibration than a step-by-step set of text. And it's worth just saying, just to your point, the current stats are, and they're moving up all the time, about 3.5 billion worldwide users are using smartphones. About 80% of us, and I guess that's probably higher in my case, but 80% of us go to mobile for product information in our first port of call. So it's about the information being there, but it's about it being in the place that really the changing demographic, the younger workforce, the younger customers, younger users, there is an expectation as much as the information being there of how to access that information.
Right. And that's what we're trying to bring younger people in every year, that it does move a lot of things to lifelong learning, and the same tool that we've used for a number of years, we may need to add a new line, we may need to change that tool out. You're going to have to keep people learning and keep people being able to adapt. And if that's the source that they'd like to go to, and it's also a bit more manageable. You don't have to have a stack of manuals and where did I put the manual? It can be available to someone, and if they don't have it, they got a new phone, well, just get the the app downloaded again, rather than having to go back and wait for a post to arrive with a big parcel in.
Absolutely. You hit on a really good point, actually, which is The output here is to help the user or our customer at the end for sure. But internally, we don't really have a system of record. And what I mean by that, not to be too techy, is we don't have a system that sort of holds this information, allows us to version it and control that. We might have a random PDF somewhere. No one really knows if it was Jane or Bob who last updated it and so on. It's got a version number, but doesn't really tie back to any particular part of the manual or the guide or whatever we're doing. And so by digitizing this information, and we have a process of you just put your PDF into the system and it will digitize it and basically get you sort of 90% there already. So we're not looking to, recreate the wheel there, give you a good starting point. But the codification, i.e. the actual collection of this data and storing it, is a massive first step to the sort of generational change of how do you transfer knowledge from the staff that you've got today that understand how to use your product and how to tell your customers how to use a product to the new staff that you're getting tomorrow and the new customers and users. And so codification for sure, that actual fact of recording and storing and being able to manage, update, etc., is a really sort of hidden strong point in this process of customer success. Not forcing us, but it's giving us a place to allow us to store and codify and understand that information. And then, of course, once we understand something, we can then pass that along or pass it along and make it better. And that could be, as you mentioned, maybe, for example, if you're in a loud environment, is a video, a good thing to have because you can't hear the audio. So, do you actually want that transcript also on the companion so you can read the transcript? So we have to have quite a lot of empathy for our end users, not just for them as a person and an age and their skill levels, but also, for example, the environment they're working in. And that's really our sort of bigger mission, is to take the frustration away of trying to realize the value of the product.
I like the way you put that, but I think you zoomed past that really amazing new feature. And I think you were telling me about it's only a new update that you've had. But just before we go back to, you can create one of these apps from a PDF. It will start looking at it and breaking that up and pulling things together. But let's just step backwards and say, well, how might we have made how long might it have taken to make one of these apps before your technology? I mean, are we talking in days or weeks or months, or where are we at?
I've got the battle scars for that for sure. So, yeah, I mean, when we look at the life cycle of trying to develop a mobile application, regardless if it's a companion app or not, there's a lot of different skill sets involved. We've got to look after the iOS and the Android users. So we've already got two sets of, highly paid and technical staff there. We've also got the design element, which is really always misunderstood. And that's I wanted it like this. Now I need it like this, to your point of iteration. And so you had lots of sort of design loops within that. And that every time you wanted to change your mind, the cost would be there. But you would often be talking about multiple months, sometimes year-long projects I've worked on. And of course, what happens is the longer those projects go on, the business is changing underneath you and your product lines, etc. So scope is changing. So it would be multi-£100,000, multi-months at the very least. And then, a 20 to 30% annual maintenance cost to keep that application going. And so it was very, very prohibitive. It's interesting to look at someone, say, like John Deere in the agricultural side. They've got around 30 companion apps. Of course, their budget is extreme. They've had millions of downloads on their companion apps, but the small agricultural manufacturers couldn't do that before. And so this idea of compressing that time down, reducing the risk and reducing the cost, they're all really important, but also making the accessibility, making it, to your point, as easy as pressing a few buttons like you would in a Word document or a spreadsheet or maybe a website builder, and getting the app I want today, and then having a few more buttons to press when I need the app for tomorrow is really important. And this is happening across all software, across all industries. But unfortunately, manufacturing seems to be left behind in a lot of places. And I think that's just because the complexity that manufacturers have for their own product that they're building, keeps our minds very much on that problem. And so hopefully we're going to go some way to solving that.
Yeah. So we've gone from multiple months, 3 to 6 months at least, for traditionally developed application, which then moved down to, what are we talking, to start seeing the app working? Are we talking weeks or days, or in the first versions of the application that you made?
Yeah, so we would look at days. There is a process that all mobile apps have to go through, which is a submission to the iOS and the Android store. So to get that on the phone, that's a formality. Can take about 5 to 7 days. We manage that 100%. So there's no complexity there. But that process is sort of third party. So a 5 to 7 day lead time. If you've got, let's say you've got a quick start user guide and a manual, for example, and I'm just talking about a single product line here, but of course you could have multiples. That sort of 5 to 7 days. So if you say a 10-day turnaround, you should have your first version of your application application on the store, fully branded under your account. So again, if I was Acme, it'd be listed as Acme. There's no mention of us at all. We're sort of white labeled in that sense. No one knows that you've created an application via Caddify. And that will look just like the John Deere app that we were talking about, just like the Tesla app that you would download. And the interesting thing is the case study that we've got for MedTech on our website shows that actually once you have the ability to change, Biocomposite, that was our launch customer, within sort of the first 6-7 months, they changed or updated the app 15 times for quite major reasons, new lines, new geographies, and particularly in medtech, you've got quite heavy regulatory and compliance requirements. So changes of just simple spelling, for example, to meet regulatory requirements. And so it sort of lives and breathes itself once it's out there. But the quickest we've done, I think, is a couple of days ready to submit to store. And we offer a quick launch program there to sort of help people bring their assets together for the first time, just really get off the bench and get that first one out.
But your PDF, your new feature of being able to start with a PDF just to get people, just conceptualize what's it going to look like? How could it work? What could we do? And not just be staring at the blank screen while you're planning out what you need to research or what you might want to write if you're writing new training. That's even faster to get you something that you're looking at. Is that right?
That's right. It's pretty amazing, actually. You know, from working in code so long in my life, to see you press a button and sort of takes a 2 to 3 minute process for maybe 100 pages, for example, and then see that actually, you know, on your application that you can run on your phone. So we have a sister companion app ourselves called our Caddify Viewer. So even before you've submitted to store, you can run what you're processing, if you like, on your phone. So you get an absolute 100% idea what it's going to look like. So you can go from uploading a PDF that you might have. Let's just take an error code guide, for example. It's, I don't know, 20 pages long. That will take probably a couple of minutes to process. You choose a few styles. They're pre-built in, but you can change those. And immediately you're seeing that on an emulator on your browser screen. So no developers, no effort. And then using our own QR code, you can actually have that running in our own Caddify Viewer, which really sort of masks what your app would look like without the initial branding, the icon, but everything else is the same. And yeah, that's pretty amazing stuff when you think how long that would have taken before. Yeah, it is exciting.
Is that one of the ways you'd work? I mean, some applications, yes, you'd want to have them public, but I mean, some information, if I'm selling you expensive tooling, I don't really want to just give that guide away. I don't want to give that training away. I don't want to give that app away. That's what someone's bought when they've bought the product. Are you saying that the apps can be sort of private or like behind some sort of access or paywall or something as well? Or is the way that they work, they're public?
Yeah, it's probably an argument each way, but from a practical sense, from the product, you have 3 types of installation process, if you like, from the user's side. You can have a non-registration flow. So in other words, I download your app, I open it up and it just opens, doesn't ask me for any credentials, doesn't restrict me in any way. And so for lots of us, from consumer products, that would be very common. We don't want to give anyone any friction. But moving up the scale to your point, we may need to know who's using our product. And so we can have a registration. So that's the middle one. That requires you to register your name and email address, just like you do for any other service, if you like, on the app, but doesn't gate me. In other words, anyone with a valid email address can sort of register. And of course, that opens up the door for marketing, which is really interesting aside to all this. Once you have access to your user, whether it be a product launch or whatever, you can then, use that information, of course, for marketing. And then thirdly, to your point, you can have pre-registered only. So in other words, let's take this, large product that you want to protect some IP or information on. You can actually ask people to register through, let's say, your website, and then you can decide whether to give them access and then add them to the system. And then they need to put in a valid username and password. In other words, you've gated that content at your own discretion. So yeah, you can look after all 3. For lots of products, definitely go down the non-registration to start with, because it's all about taking friction out. You want to scan a QR code, get the app on and start using it straight away. But of course, as you said, if you've got information that you did want to protect, you can handle that as well.
Oh, super. I mean, as we're coming towards the end of the interview, and it's been really good to talk with you, maybe let's just get a bit more outside of this sort of smaller space. I mean, it's a smaller mobile space, isn't it?
Yes.
But think of it in that terms. I mean, is a lot of this stuff about sort of managing risk and being adaptable to change? I mean, there are some things that this helps mitigate or helps work in these environments?
I think, yeah, absolutely. And broadly, obviously, we've had the most exciting few years, haven't we? Not just our industry, but across the board. And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of risk, in terms of sort of larger environmental risks. So, for example, how the world works. If we look at COVID, the lack of face-to-face availability, sort of virtual change. How do we train and support people in a virtual way? That's a big change to the world. The big change for people to consume digital content, again, that sort of thing. And then in terms of risk mitigation, so where we talk about sort of health and safety and compliance and so on, again, that can absolutely help here where someone's gone through an onboarding process, or you can actually give them that advice before you start a guide to say, this is the safety equipment you should have. So anyone gone through that guide has already done that. And then larger, as we understand what information we've given our users, Caddify as a CMS, as a content management system, allows anyone who's sort of auditing to say, what information am I providing at this time? Again, in medical, that's a big thing, as it is in other, very safety intensive industries. But yeah, just generally, there's lots of other boxes that this idea of a companion app can solve. And I suppose broader, as sort of us at home, we're already used to this idea of companions. I don't know if you have a Google or Alexa, but this idea we're starting to interact with the digital version, if you like, of the product or service. That's that move. And to your point about sort of compliance and so on, the beauty with digital is you can change it now and it's impactful immediately. Whereas, of course, if we're in analog sort of PDFs or written literature, how do we track who's got what version and so on? So, yeah, I hope that was the gist of your conversation.
No, it is. I mean, and are you seeing that these are challenges just generally in shipping products and initiating changes in tooling and devices that the industry's facing in the next few years, and these are going to become more prevalent?
I think so. If we think of the demographics, I mean, I still think I'm young, but I'm probably not. But yeah, particularly the demographics are changing across the board, whether that be for manufacturing, whether that be for our customers, but just wider. And there's also this sort of, we pick skills up more transiently. We don't tend to have these long courses, whether that will be, where we went to college or shadowed someone. And so I think this idea of how we learn this, you and I were talking before about lifelong learning, this ability where a companion app grows to become literally the companion that I have with that product to make me successful. And as I say, the demographics a lot, we know the skills shortages internally for manufacturing. And of course, I think one of the things that maybe we lose sight of, or just because we're so focused in, of course, those same skill problems are our customers' problems as well. And so, yeah, I think it's a broad change to allow us to train and support ourselves as much as possible.
Totally on board with that. Just to give you the fun question at the end of giving you or one of your customers your superhero costume and allowing you to take on the world. If the world and situation around you's box you in a corner, are there any one or two things that you'd like to come out on top that you'd grab? So thinking of yourself or thinking of a customer, whichever way you'd like to take that.
I think for me, I don't know if you've heard, this is going to be a funny one, of a product called a One Wheel, which is basically an electric skateboard. I wish I had a superpower to ride that properly. I've got one. I very closely come to, that's in the personal side. And I think in the customer's side, I think just being a bit more serious is this idea that as products become more intelligent, the ability for those customers to really use that digital interaction between product and person. And I think we're starting to see that. And if there was a superpower customers have to understand that and to use that, I think would be excellent.
Super. That's great talking to you again and being able to get you on the show. Yeah, what sort of customers or what would be good ways of getting in contact with you after the show?
We've got, as everyone has, our website, which is Caddify, Caddify.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Justin Halfpenny. So yeah, always open to have anyone reaching out, even if it's just more broader about a technology issue with mobile or with anything around product adoption, particularly. And yeah, in terms of sort of customer types for us, as I say, from the beginning, we can go from very small, very early startups in terms of manufacturers and scale right up to teams that have, dedicated product marketing departments, etc. And in terms of product type, anything that has the success of our success as the manufacturer dependent upon the customer's usage and their successful usage and adoption, that's definitely our place that we'd like to play.
Sounds super. Well, I look forward to being able to partner with you in the future. We've had a demo of it before and it's been good. And I certainly see these coming in more and more places, people offering how to help and how to keep learning. There's plenty of things that I've been trying to teach myself and learn more on the job. So thanks very much for joining us again, Justin.
Thanks, Tristan. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us again today on the Cliff Notes podcast. If you'd like to get in contact with myself or the guest, as always, the show notes will be available online at cliffnotespodcast.com or on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can look us up and we're there too because we love to hear feedback and get in contact with you. So have a good day and keep those wheels turning.